Hey everyone, welcome back to the Socially Distant Lawyer. I'm Mitch Hayes,
And I'm Greg Vinogradsky.
and on today's episode, we're going to recap the year of the Socially Distant Lawyer. We're very festive with our holiday sweaters on, and we're back home again like we started this year. So we've talked about many topics throughout the year, and we're going to give you a brief overview and see where we've been and where we're going. We're going to talk about condos, marijuana, business interruption, and jury trials.
That's right. So briefly, just recapping what's been going on in the community association industry. There is a current pending statute that's working its way through the state House of New Jersey for COVID immunity for community associations, similar to a tort immunity type of statute that says for any negligence claims where there's a claim against the association related to COVID-19, the association is immune from liability. This would not apply to claims of gross negligence, of course. The next one on moratorium on evictions. There is still a moratorium in New York and New Jersey on evictions that has been extended through the emergency orders by the governors, but that has not stopped the collections process for community associations. So condos and homeowners associations and co-ops are still permitted to pursue for delinquent association fees. And finally, and Mitch will speak more about the marijuana legalization issue, but related to condominiums, there is a statute that's working its way through New Jersey that would permit community associations to regulate the smoking or vaping or whatever else of marijuana actually inside of units and obviously in the common elements. So we're going to keep an eye on that and report back as soon as we find out more.
So we have previously talked about the marijuana bill that was passed on election day by an overwhelming majority, 2-1. Now the legislature in New Jersey has finally passed a bill through both the Assembly and the Senate, and it's right now on Governor Murphy's desk. And what the bill says right now, which is obviously subject to change, is that 70% of state sales tax revenue from marijuana purchases and also excise taxes on growers would be going back to minority communities, which would be disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. Now, the bill talks about certain percentages of the population, which focuses on some of the larger cities in New Jersey that have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs, by increased incarceration rates and arrests. And those cities and areas would get more of the funds directed to them. Again, this is the preliminary bill that had been passed and is waiting for governor's signature. Some of the other questions that we had is what's going to happen along the lines of decriminalization and if that would ever be under consideration now. And it seems like in this bill also that there's going to be no arrest for possessing less than 6 ounces or selling up to an ounce. Those have overwhelmingly passed both the Assembly and the Senate. And also, again, waiting for the governor's signature. Another question that we had in one of our last episodes was how the bill was going to be constructed and how licenses were going to be established and how permits were going to be given out within the state. So it seems like there will be no more than 28 active permits that would be given out in the state over the first 18 months. And you'll only be allowed to get either one permit per business to either cultivate, maintain, manufacture, or dispense. Now, there is an exception for investors that are funding marijuana licenses for minority, female-owned, or disabled-owned businesses. There will be able to purchase more businesses and fund more licenses of those 28 if they're going to be investing in those types of businesses. Again, more questions to be answered as this bill gets hopefully voted into law as it goes into effect January 1st, the constitutional amendment. And we're going to see how the public areas are going to be affected. Can you smoke in public or otherwise use marijuana in public? Some issues to focus on as we proceed and we see what Murphy does with the bill. The other issue that we've discussed throughout the year a lot on the SDL is business interruption coverage. So what's happened so far? When the pandemic first started and when these suits first started to happen, there were discussions about business interruption coverage and that there was no direct physical loss. Since there was no direct physical loss to any of the businesses, then the motions that were being filed by the carriers were being granted. And conversely, the motions that were being filed by the policyholders were being denied. Now we've seen a small section of cases, a lot dealing with the all risk policy, where motions have been granted in favor of policyholders or denied, motions to dismiss were denied at the outset that were filed by the insurance carriers. Now, there's a recent case out of North Carolina which granted summary judgment for a policyholder and determined that the CGL policy that this group of policyholders had covered a business interruption loss because of the COVID-related shutdown. Now, it covered it because there was no direct physical loss defined in the policy. The all-risk policy took a broader view of the definition of loss and defined it as any accidental physical loss or accidental physical damages. Now, there is no definition for direct physical loss, and that's what the court hung their hat on in making this order. And they concluded that the inability to utilize or possess something, such as the business, which was directly related to the government orders, what qualified for business interruption loss. And therefore, they granted summary judgment on behalf of that policyholder. I'm sure that decision is being appealed, and we'll see what happens next year when the North Carolina courts issue a decision on that motion. We'll continue to keep you updated on business interruption coverage as we hit 2021.
And finally, we'll talk about jury trials and the suspension of jury trials and what it looks like in the next year we can expect. So as we discussed in the prior episodes, there was a pilot program where essentially a lot of the voir diring of the juries was done via Zoom. As there was an uptick in cases, all jury trials were suspended again. And it kind of stopped everything in its traces and in its horses. So in 2021, we've heard that they're going to be trying to implement this pilot program again when the case numbers go down and when they feel comfortable bringing people back into the courtrooms. So the actual full in-person jury trials are not looking likely in 2021 at all, but there will be some form of it next year. Instead of the jury trials, what we've seen and what we've had success with is settlement conferences with judges and mediation programs in certain counties in New York where otherwise they weren't as useful, but now they're becoming more useful as the judges are able to hammer home the fact that a plaintiff won't be able to see a courtroom for maybe 10, 11 months. So it's beneficial for them to resolve the case now and move on and close the file and give your client the money and everyone can go on rather than backlog the court system.
So that's a wrap on 2020. SDL has covered a lot of topics over the course of the year. Greg and I were happy to launch this project. We're happy to bring you issues as they arise. I'm sure there'll be some more content, much more content that we bring you next year on these issues and many more. Make sure to keep following us on all of our social media, comment so we can find out what you want us to talk about. And have a very happy holidays and New Year. And until next time, take care.